Today, just by default, is one of the saddest days in baseball history. In sports history, actually. No matter how much you hate certain teams, it's never a good sight to see that team getting stripped away from the people who matter most. The fans, the people. Whether it was the Montreal Expos leaving for Washington, D.C., or the most notable and infamous occurrences of teams leaving cities, like when the Giants and Dodgers left New York for California around the same time, it's all sad, at least for the time it happens, because you could argue that Brooklyn losing their team in Los Angeles getting the Dodgers and San Francisco getting the Giants was for the best, considering how much success and history has been made in those cities, and the Mets becoming a beloved team after coming into Queens in 1962. I even had the privilege of a first-hand personal perspective on this, as my late grandmother, who was a huge Mets fan but formerly a Brooklyn Dodger fan, would always talk about how upset she was when the team left. And after the Dodgers and Giants left for California, about a decade later, they were joined by the formerly known Kansas City A's, who would become the San Francisco Giants' neighbors in the Bay Area, going to Oakland and becoming the Oakland A's, with that becoming their third city in the franchise's history. And in the 56 years that have since followed, the Oakland A's have become one of the most notable franchises in all baseball. They've been one of the most successful, one of the most innovative. They've had some of the most iconic players. They've had arguably the most electric crowds when needed most. A freaking movie was even made about them, starring Brad Pitt, Jonah Hill, and Chris Pratt. I mean, this wasn't just some irrelevant franchise in some irrelevant city. But as we stand here today, the Oakland A's no longer exist. The team will never play another game again in Oakland. And I can spend this whole video harping on the negatives and how and why this ownership sucks and how it's their fault, that this shouldn't be happening, etc. And I'll address that, but at the end of the day, there's nothing I can do to change the situation. All I feel I should do is remember the good times, to smile for what we had rather than cry because it's over. Although it's 1000% okay to do that too. You can cry. Cry it all out. So let's go down memory lane, Avengers Endgame style, but without the endless plot holes, and show just exactly why it's a shame the Oakland A's are now dead. Really quick, if you're not dead and watching this, like the video and subscribe if you haven't yet, or just wait to see if you enjoy the video and then make a decision. That works too. The A's are one of those teams fans of other teams over the years, especially in recent years, I've liked to chalk up as one with bad fans, with fans who just don't care to show up, comparing them with the Rays, and that's just way too inaccurate. Now, look, is this a fan base you can compare to the Red Sox, Yankees, or Cubs, for example? No, of course not. But I think the Oakland A's are a classic example of if you build it, they will come. If you build a good and fun team that wins games, support won't really be an issue. And if you look at the team's attendance over the last 50 or so years, it lines up. No, they might not show up in droves in a year the team sucks like Cubs fans would, but if the team is good, you can expect what I think is the loudest, most energetic, and hostile crowd in all of sports. Oakland sports fans are wild, and the Oakland A's have also been one of the most successful teams in baseball since their birth. They've made the postseason 21 times in their 56-year history. That's over 37% of the time. They went back-to-back-to-back in World Series titles in the early 70s, won another championship to say goodbye to the 80s, a World Series that featured a 10-game break in the middle of it because of a hurricane that took place during Game 3, and the franchise has since formed into that low-payroll, scrappy-type team we've all come to know them by. They're a team that eventually became infamous for not paying their best players, ever, and just being made full of future Yankees and Red Sox greats. But don't let it get past you that so many of those Yankee and Red Sox and other team greats were Oakland greats first. But before we get into how the A's were looked at in the more recent years, before the moneyball era, let's go back to the stars they had back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Reggie Jackson, one of the most historic players ever, a Hall of Famer who became known as Mr. October for how good and clutch he was in the postseason, played 5 memorable seasons for the Yankees. Before that, 8 seasons in Oakland, one of them being an MVP season. He was part of those back-to-back-to-back rings in the 70s and went on to finish his career in Oakland when it was all said and done. Another Hall of Famer, Rickey Henderson, who also played for the Yankees, was an Oakland A first, and went on to have 3 separate stints with the A's throughout his 25-year career, where he became the base-stealing king, something he's mostly known for, although he did a lot of other things well too. Mark McGwire, largely known for his amazing home run chase as a Cardinal that he won in 1998, was Sammy Sosa from the Cubs, even though he somehow didn't win the MVP that year, which makes no sense. Sosa won it. Not only did he win that home run chase by hitting 70 on the year, but pretty much all of his numbers were better than Sosa, and it wasn't even really close either. This was back before voters had brains, but still, what the hell? Anyway, McGwire made history that year and in his time in St. Louis, but you know who had him first? Oakland. And this is where we get into the Bash Brothers, because from the late 80s into the mid 90s, McGwire was in Oakland alongside Jose Canseco, who was there from the mid 80s until the early 90s. So he left Oakland a few years before McGwire did, but those two still were teammates long enough and good enough together to become known as the Bash Brothers. A couple of big guys who just had a bunch of power and won a championship together in 1989. The two became such a commercial hit, it was such a big thing in Oakland that even brought attention from other fan bases wanting to see them when the A's visited their town. Yeah, Jose Canseco is a nut, and the two of them were eventually exposed as steroid users during their careers, but it was still a really fun time at the time in Oakland, a city that had some legendary pitching too. Hall of Famers Catfish Hunter and Rollie Fingers were both amazing A's pitchers before finishing their careers off elsewhere. Hunter was in Kansas City with the A's for 3 years and then Oakland for 7, so 10 with the organization, being a part of those three-peating A's teams along with Rollie Fingers before playing 5 years with the Yankees into retirement. Hunter was actually someone who got the first big free agent contract ever. It's laughable now, but when he signed a 5-year contract with the Yankees for $3.35 million in 1974, he was the highest paid player in baseball and the richest pitcher in baseball history. It was the beginning of a new era in that way, but either way, when Hunter was an A, he was great. Same with Rollie Fingers, who was in Oakland for 9 seasons, was dominant for them until finishing his career in San Diego and Milwaukee. Both guys had your classic mustache look that was common and trendy back in that day, straight workhorses on the mound, and the same went for Dennis Eckersley. Eckersley was on the mound for the famous Kirk Gibson walk-off home run for the Dodgers in a World Series they ended up winning in 1988, but Eckersley is one of the greatest relievers of all time. Known for his weird delivery, the man was straight up nasty, and in different fashion than the other old-timers I've mentioned so far, because he actually didn't start his career in Oakland. He didn't join them until his 15th season actually, but stayed there for 9. He's forever known as one of the greatest ever, a Hall of Famer, someone who even won the MVP award one year as a reliever, which is unheard of, and he did it in Oakland. Now, it's interesting because despite the A's being a team that won championships in the 70s and 80s, I think what they did later on as a franchise ended up being the best part of this team's time in Oakland, or at least the most iconic, and I don't think I'm alone in that. It didn't result in any championships, it barely even resulted in them getting past the first round of any postseason appearance, but it was just so magical. The Moneyball era. Say whatever you want about the actual facts in the movie Moneyball, how they left out some really key good players on the A's to help push the underdog narrative, that the additions made to replace the big guns in the offseason were the sole reason they won, etc. Without the Oakland A's, though, we wouldn't have gotten what I think is the best sports movie to date, let alone baseball movie. Most baseball movies tend to be stupid, goofy, not to be taken seriously, like, at all, and that's fine for what those movies are. Some are taken more seriously, like Field of Dreams, for example. I like that movie a lot. I mean, how can you hate James Earl Jones giving one of the most iconic baseball-themed speeches ever? May he rest in peace. But Moneyball is the best baseball movie in how real it feels and how raw it feels. The acting is great, unsurprisingly, with how loaded the cast is, but it's such a great story about life. You don't have to be some baseball genius to understand and enjoy this movie. This movie is everything. The music is incredible. It's funny, but so naturally funny, not over the top. It's a good lesson and metaphor for life, not just baseball. It's motivating, inspiring. It's friggin' awesome. And although the actual story of this team may have more to it than the movie shows, it's still a great movie. And it's also given us some of the best memes. The story is the very beginning of an entire era and revolution that the Oakland A's started, or at least catapulted further into what it is now. Advanced stats in baseball to better evaluate players had actually been around for years before this. Teams like Cleveland had a lot of smart baseball minds in this way. They had a ton of those minds in the 90s, with one of them joining Oakland in the late 90s. The character Jonah Hill plays in the movie, Peter Brand, doesn't actually exist. He's based off a real guy named Paul DePodesta who helped Billy Beane with a lot of the advanced thinking that went into what the A's did and would do for years to come. So the A's didn't invent this stuff necessarily, but they of course played a big part in how far advanced stats have come for all of baseball. The A's started off the new millennium well, making the playoffs in 2000 and 2001, winning over 100 games in 2001 and losing to the Yankees in the first round, a team that would end up taking their best hitter that very offseason, Jason Giambi, while the Red Sox would sign Johnny Damon, another good player. So what followed was Oakland trying to figure out how to replace these guys without spending much money because they didn't really have as much to spend as the other guys. And what followed sparked something that's gone on to affect all of baseball. Analytics run rampant among really every organization now. Teams like the Boston Red Sox won championships using the A's model, and although, yes, the A's did have Miguel Tejada in 2002, the American League MVP, yes, they also had a three-headed monster in their starting rotation with Tim Hudson, Barry Zito, who won the Cy Young Award that year, and Mark Mulder, along with Corey Lytle, who nobody talks about, who also was good. May he rest in peace after tragically dying in a plane crash in 2006. Those were insanely important reasons as to why the A's went on to win more games than they did the year before, and in the middle of that have an iconic 20-game win streak. But the Scott Hatteberg thing, that was real. He was a very underrated preseason pickup that ended up being important. Same with Chad Bradford, someone the A's had for pennies on the dollar that year, all for him to be a really good reliever. And this is something the A's would especially become good at when it came to relievers. I remember it was in 2018 when the A's had arguably the best bullpen in baseball, the best closer in baseball, hands down, on a team that shocked everyone and won 97 games to go to the postseason. The closer, Blake Trinan, had a historic season. Lou Trevino, who was a rookie, was important, and so was Yusmeiro Petit. Those three were paid a combined about $6 million. That's it. So it's just stuff like that the A's became good at and known for after the whole Moneyball thing. Now, I don't care how much you think or how much you hear the Oakland Coliseum is a dump, because you know what? Maybe it is a dump, but it's also home to some of the greatest and magical baseball moments ever. One that will forever remain magical, emotional, tear-jerking, all the above and more for anyone to watch, not just A's fans, was Dallas Braden's perfect game in 2010. And what made this one in particular so special was the fact that it was Dallas Braden who did it, and the day he did it on, Mother's Day. Dallas Braden's mother had passed away during his senior year of high school, so by default, Mother's Day is probably the most emotional day of the year for him. Well, how about taking the ball on that day and throwing a perfect game while your maternal grandmother, who he lived with following his mother's death over the years, was there to witness it as the two embraced on the Coliseum field immediately afterward? Does it get any more emotional and magical than that? I'll answer it for you. No. And Dallas has continued to be a big voice for the A's as their color commentator for years, along with just a massive advocate for everything Oakland. He's the definition of a man of the people. One of the greatest moments in A's history, definitely the greatest in recent history and also in Oakland sports history, was 2012, most notably the ending. The 2012 A's were a team coming off a 74-88 finish in 2011. Most of the team's starting rotation was traded away to get younger players, and many predicted them to be awful and lose as many as 100 games. And after a rocky start, the A's started gelling and finding magic, going 19-5 in the month of July. The team had 15 walk-off wins on the year, and despite being 12.5 games back of the Texas Rangers halfway through the season, the A's went into the final series of the season 2 games back of the Rangers. And who would they play? The Rangers. And what would they do? Proceed to sweep them in front of a packed and rowdy Coliseum to win the NL West division. 2018 had that magical feel to it after 3 straight misses at the playoffs and everyone doubting them heading into the season. 2019 was an even better version of that team, full of guys who would eventually go on to do the inevitable and become richer elsewhere. And since that's happened, since that newest batch of winning players in Oakland have found new homes, the A's have been a complete laughingstock to everyone else, and it's a shame. A completely self-inflicted laughingstock, but one that's gone beyond just being a bad team. After years of team president Dave Kaval promising the fans the team was staying in Oakland, coming up with the rooted in Oakland phrase, he, along with the owner, the ultimate villain, John Fisher, did the worst thing imaginable. I would call those two Emperor Palpatine and Darth Vader, but that'd be a great insult to Emperor Palpatine and Darth Vader. But these two basically sold their souls to the devil, choosing to move the team to Las Vegas, something that won't even happen for several more years. So in the meantime, the A's will plan on playing at the San Francisco Giants AAA park in Sacramento. They will no longer be based in Oakland, and it's a tragedy. It really is. This fan base has done some amazing things over the last couple of years since the move became a reality in order to fight against it. The reverse boycott that featured the whole stadium going mute at once in the middle of the game to then start chanting "sell the team." All the fans who showed up to a non-official fan event that the fans put together, not the team. Stuff like that. And as great as that stuff has been, it sucks that it even has to happen in the first place. That this team with all this rich history is getting taken from the fans, the people of Oakland, the people who truly matter, not the rich higher-ups who could give less of a damn. Now, I'm no expert when it comes to the political reasons to all of this, but what I do understand is the basic idea of stripping away something in a place that means so much to the people that live there and move it to the most superficial place imaginable. There's nothing about Oakland that's sexy, but that's the entire point of why the A's and their fans mean so much. It's the genuine love and feel for the team. Las Vegas is the complete opposite. Everything about that place is about the lights and glamour, nothing truly authentic. And it's pretty obvious John Fisher and the A's higher-ups never really cared to keep this franchise in Oakland, to blatantly deplete the roster and put out teams you know would do nothing else but fail, and then blame the fans for not showing up. But enough about those guys. Again, there's nothing I or any of us can really do to change the situation. What matters most are the people who do matter most. The players, all the ones I've mentioned in this video along with plenty others, and most importantly, the fans. Guys like Gabriel Hernandez, the biggest A's fan I know. Someone who lives and breathes this team, no matter how ugly it's gotten. Go check out his YouTube channel, I'll have it linked in the description below. To the people who run the independent fan group Oakland 68s, to all the workers inside of the Coliseum over the years, and just everyone. Every single person who's supported this team, every single person who's given an otherwise broken down, crime-ridden city with a bad reputation a charm to it, a gritty charm to it, one that I'm gonna miss a lot. Despite me never even visiting the damn place, I've never stepped foot in the Coliseum, and neither have I even walked around the city at all. But from afar, I've always latched onto it. I've always enjoyed watching A's games on TV when they're good, in large part because of the fans. There's just a different, like I said, gritty feel to it that I've always appreciated. Something that's different from any other place. And so, as of today, the day of this video being made, the same day the final game ever is played at the Oakland Coliseum, September 26, 2024, an emotional day for everyone at this place. A day that had Oakland legends and World Series champions Dave Stewart and Ricky Henderson throwing out the first pitch, Barry Zito singing the national anthem, the very last national anthem that will ever be sung at the Coliseum, and a day that featured the Oakland A's winning in the final game ever played at the Coliseum in front of 46,889 fans. I just want to say, thank you, Oakland. You all made baseball better.